so hot that I melted. I fell right through the cracks. Now I'm trying to get back. Before the cool done run out, I'll be giving it my best. This and nothing's gonna stop me but divine intervention. I reckon it's again my turn to win some or learn some, but I won't hesitate no more, no more. It cannot wait. I'm yours.
How's it going? I know you got a clue what you're doing.
Hi, good day. I'm Sarah and I'm going to report on English as an equalizing factor, and also I'm going to report on Almerinos Isaon, pag-isa sa bana nga magulga o asawang di kahibalong hulog.
Hi, this is Blezyl and I'm going to discuss to you about the status quo of Filipino women's rights.
I'm Jareena to report on the profiles of the Filipino women writers.
Hi, I'm Carine and I'm going to report about the development of the literary writing, specifically about politicization, self-reflective, affirmation of womanhood, and then the growing number of the Filipino workers.
And last, I'm Lovella and I'm going to report about the village fiction and the shift of writers across their works.
Women's literature is the body of literary work created by women or written for an audience of women. While it can seem that over the course of history, there have been more famous men writers than female writers. On closer examination, one can find a number of women who wrote plays, poetry, fiction, and other literary works of significance. Even in ancient times, there were women poets. But it is true that women did not publish their literary work in any great numbers. In the Philippines, women writers brought out the appearance of a clear-cut feminist consciousness linking it to social protests such as gender discrimination and politicalization, which brought out the awareness of corruption and other matters in our government. An example of gender discrimination was written by Cora Almerino entitled Unsaon Pag-isa sa Bana nga Manggulga sa Asawang Dili Kahibalong Muluto, or How to Saute a Husband Who Buries His Wife Who Doesn't Know How to Cook.
So now, I'll be discussing to you about the status quo of Filipino women writers. So the Philippines can be proud not only because of the country's high literacy rate, but also because of her women authors who write and publish in the many languages of the country, both in the Philippines and abroad in Diaspora. The development of women's writing is tied to the history of the country and the language question, from oral tradition to silencing of women under Spanish rule, from the English period under American rule to the days when more literature is written in vernacular. From the part of women, it has been always the question of struggle to become heard. The first part of the Spanish era and almost total silencing in their period ended with the downing of women's rebellion in the end of the 1800s. At that time, only a few were brave enough to write, with an exception of quite Leona Florentino, the founder of the women's literature. Even though political and ideological suppression has diminished and there are lots of women's writings, The economic troubles limit possibilities of many. Through decades, a literary career has been possible only for those who can afford it. Even now, it is not possible to rise from the grassroots to the position of the professional writer. Another problem is to become writers. Many women writers are widely read and published, mostly in magazines, but because of commercialism, they are not raised as fierce and esteemed authors. In modern day Philippine literature from 1960 to the 1980s, feminism became the focus of Philippine writers. Feminist female writers were inclined towards breaking away from the traditional, idealized, and typecast image of Filipina and figures of the past, being matriarchal mystics and figures that perform sacrifices, undergo suffrage, and works of martyrdom which were expected from their upbringing. Women writers also passed judgment against the typical portrayal of women as sex symbols.
Many Filipino women writers have their own special reason for using English as an instrument of personal liberation. According to Edna Zapanta Manlapas, the relative absence of women in Philippine literature in English has not gone unnoticed or undone. But it is important to point out that, unlike women writers in the vernacular, women writers in English were present from the very beginnings of the Philippine literature in English. The first published short story in English, Dead Stars, in 1927, was written by Paz Marquez Benitez. It is important to create the position from which Filipino women writers in English write. We only then might understand why they write as well as for whom they write.
The history of Filipino women writers is an account of how Philippine women became literary, or lady pen pushers, who created literary works of fiction or factual, and historical storybooks, poetry, novels, short stories, essays, and other known writings genres. Writing in English, Filipino, and other local languages and native dialects, female writers from the Philippine archipelago utilized literature, in contrast with the oral tradition of the past as the living voices. These Filipino women writers hold their bachelor degrees, master's degrees, or some have doctoral degrees, which were graduates of leading educational institutions such as UP, UST, Ateneo de Manila and De La Salle, and Silliman University, and some from abroad. To name some of these writers, we have first, Angela Manalang Gloria, who, being among the first generation of female students at the State University, graduated with PhD degree in 1929, major in English, and a summa cum laude. Second, Edith Tiempo, a poet, fictionist, teacher, and literary critic, and considered one of the finest Filipino writers in English. Some of her works were The Builder, A Blade of Fern, and others. Third will be Rowena Tiempo Torrevillas, who won prizes in various literary contests such as Carlos Palanca Memorial Literary Awards